Well, thank you very much. Well, first of all, thanks to the folks at the University of Maryland, University College, Dr. Palin, Dr. Hasib, for putting this all together. You guys did a nice job. Always appreciate it. As you see, I'm Jason Miller, executive editor of what was now known as Federal News Network. Yes, yesterday or Monday, we changed our name. So now you all have to remember me by not Federal News Radio, but Federal News Network, FNN, yes. What changes? Nothing, but the name. But that's okay. So the panel today, we're going to have some fun. I'm big on the audience participation. I'm a big fan of Phil Donahue. Who remembers Phil Donahue? Come on, raise your hand. Who's the old people, right? Me, yeah. He liked to walk the stairs and get the audience involved. Remember, this is about you guys. This is your panel, not mine. I can ask questions all day. In fact, that's what I get paid to do, right? So please participate. Please make this your panel. So we're talking about the life of a CISO. Each of the CISOs are going to tell you basically something you don't know about their job. They're going to take about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we're going to ask some questions and have a good conversation. But before we get started, I'm going to entertain you with some AM radio trivia, because part of the Federal News Network is Federal News Radio at 1500 AM on your AM dial. Now, for those of you who live in the Baltimore area, yes, you can get it. Sometimes it's a little staticky because it's in the DC area, but please keep that in mind. So it's part of the audience participation theme here. So here's your first trivia question. For the most part, we know a couple things, right? Stations east of the Mississippi begin with a W, right? WTOP, WFED, right? Stations west of the Mississippi start with K. But how many stations that are left still use K east of the Mississippi? Have you heard this one before? Or you just know? Call it out. That's one, right? But how many total? No, there's more. Maybe. Come on, throw me a number, somebody. 5, that's a good one. One more. 6. Audience participation, guys. All right. So there's also 11 west of the Mississippi that still use W. Most of them are along the border states, like along the Mississippi River. Okay, next one. Now, we also know a couple things, right? Canadian stations begin with C. Mexican stations begin with X. Now, do we know why we use K, W, C, and X in North America? Anybody? What was the answer? ISO codes. I think it's a little earlier than when someone thought of ISO. But back in 1912, several countries attended a conference centered on international radio telegraphs. And one of the things that come out of that was this idea of K, WK, C, and X. Now, we also got N and A for the Armed Forces radio. So now you have, you could choose from K or W, and then they kind of push through the Mississippi. So, all right, a couple more. I know. See, that guy right there is entertained. What year did AM, FM radios become standard in all cars? Call it out. Audience participation. Just call it out. 1960, too early. Too late, I mean, too early, yes. 66, too early. 70's close. 71 is the answer. All right, last one. You guys are doing good with audience participation. We're getting warmed up. All right, from 53 to 63, all American-made AM radios had a small triangle on the frequency dial 640 and at 1240. Who remembers why they had this little triangle? Huh? I think you're very close. Civil defense. Yes. All right, so here you go. Now you can amaze your family and friends tonight with AM radio trivia. And don't forget, it works in your car, too. All right. So the life of a federal CISO, that's what we're talking about here today, even though I could talk to you about AM radio all day. Obviously, life is not easy. Have you guys seen the graphic that's going around? It's the sleeping patterns of CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and CISOs. Have you seen this?
Yes.
It's been on the old internet. I don't know if you're familiar with that thing. So you see the 3 CEOs, CFOs, and COOs kind of sleeping comfortably in their beds, on their sides, on their backs. And then you look at the CISO bed, and there's nothing there. The covers aren't messed up, anything. So hopefully you guys get a little more sleep than that. But we'll see if that's true, right? But what makes a good CISO? Well, over the last 15 years, it's been a combination of soft and hard skills. We know that. The hard skills are, hey, can you read an audit log, right? To understand the ever-changing threats. Hey, what about all these products from these vendors that, can you use them? How do you use them? Do they make sense to use them? And then we have all the emerging technologies now, cloud, AI, machine learning, and the like. And then the soft skills, right? You got to be able to explain to non-techies why cybersecurity matters. got to help the CIO. We've heard this before. The CIO not be the CINO. Who's heard that old line, right? That's an old line. All right, so a couple things. Back in 2003, the SANS Institute wrote a research paper that the CISO's leadership abilities and communication skills will come into play to be able to strike a balance between business and security requirements, persuade executives to approve any necessary security projects. 15 years later, still very true. In fact, McAfee wrote in July on a blog post, the CISO's role has become more elevated because of the importance of data management in the digital age. For companies, information and security are not part of the business, they are the business. Very true today. And finally, the CIO Council in the federal government put out a CISO handbook earlier this year to help current and up-and-coming CISOs and security professionals know what it takes to be a CISO, what are their skill sets that are needed, and went through a bunch of different chapters, managing risk, management of resources, and examples of internal policies, and just kind of shows you just how complicated it is to be a CISO. All right, so how do you handle all these challenges? That's why we have a panel. I'm not really that smart about these things. So we are unrehearsed, we are unplanned. I've asked each of them to take a few minutes to tell you something you don't know about their job, and then we're gonna have a conversation. We have a volunteer, or do you want me to start at the end with Jyothi and ladies first?
Sure.
Take it.
So I just wanted to first come out and say I have been really impressed with all the panels today. I was telling Mansoor that I'm really happy to see so many women on the panels, as well as speakers and just women in the audience. Most of the conferences I've gone to, I've been the only one. So yeah, yay. So I'm really impressed about that. And just to encourage the women out there that are students right now, go out there, take risks, think outside of the box. I think somebody said they came originally with an art degree or artistic major. I've actually found that to be really supportive of our roles. Not necessarily going to be drawing pictures for people, which you might have to do.
Yeah.
You might. Sometimes senior leadership likes pictures, but the picture has to make sense. But I think bringing in that artistic side, as well as the emotional intelligence, as well as the technical, really combined, it really makes up the CISO, or a good CISO, I would say. So women tend to have pretty much all of those intrinsic qualities in them. So I would say if you're a female student in the audience, go out there, conquer the world. Don't be afraid to take risks. If you see a job that's out there that you feel that you're 80% qualified, but that 20% you're stopping you, don't let that 20% stop you. Just go for it. Because I have seen that difference where when we have male students apply for jobs, they might even be 20% qualified, but they'll still go for it because there could be a 20% chance to get that job. But for my world, I actually have a creative side as well. I'm also a dance teacher, and I actually teach dance for kids with special needs. And you would be kind of surprised when you see the similarities between doing that and being a CISO. I'm not saying that the people I work with have special needs, but but what I am saying is there's a very unique skill set that's needed to manage up, manage down, manage all around you as well. So I am the CISO for National Institutes of Health Clinical Center, which is the largest biomedical research hospital in the country. So with that, you manage clinical staff, doctors, nurses, and we all know how fun they are. Especially when you're trying to speak German to them, which is what English sounds like to them when you're speaking security. But you really have to speak their language to make them understand the drawbacks of not looking at security even in a clinical profession. And then you have researchers, scientists, they're all doing great work, at NIH. They're finding cures for cancer, finding cures for other diseases, but just letting them, kind of bringing in the environment of, not, hey, don't do this, don't do that, but more so, how can I help you do your job more securely? How can I help you save your data? Because if you lose your data, then you're not helping anyone. You're not helping the community, you're not helping the population, you're not helping NIH. So just speaking their terms. And then you have the C-level suite, speaking their terms. When you go to a CFO, I report to a CIO, who then reports to the CFO. You just have to know the right language to speak to the right person at the right time as well. So I would say that that may not have been something that's well known, that's out there. As some of the other panelists have spoken, technology plays a certain part, but the bigger part is actually the emotional intelligence and thinking outside the box that I find to be the most useful.
All right, excellent. Now I get my one obligatory follow-up. I think you make a really interesting point as speaking on their terms, and I think that's been the biggest change that I've seen as covering CISOs over the last 15, 20 years. What is that like when you talk to a scientist, when you talk to a medical researcher? How do you know to speak their terms? Like, how do you know that you don't just walk in and say, well, if you do that, the threat assessment that I've come up with, the risk is too high, and they go, what are you talking about, or vice versa? Like how do you ensure that you're speaking their terms? What are some ways?
Sure. So when I first got to NIH about 7 years ago, that was the case. Nobody wanted to talk to me. They found what I looked like, and then when they just avoided me in the hallways. Like, we know who she is, don't talk to her. Or if you call them, they immediately think that they're in trouble, and like, I didn't do it. I'm like, why? Well, what didn't you not do?
I didn't click on the link, I didn't. No, that's right.
Oh, that was you.
That was me.
So we try to change the environment a little bit by just having these, me and my team. I grew my team. I had 4 people when I started. Now I have about 14, which took 7 years to get, but you can tell security is important to us now. But the way we got there was to have these kind of, not as big of a conference, but just have these little groups set up once a month or so. And we just said, hey, here's a security office, we're not gonna take any names, we're not gonna write down. If you feel free to just come to us and just ask questions. We're here for you. And then we'll also try to project some do's and don'ts, just general things like, here's a secure way of surfing the web, things like that. And we did that for almost 6 months. And we had people come to us, ask questions. We did some demos on the fly just to kind of show them cross-site scripting. Nobody understands what that means when you're a doctor. So we kind of show them, hey, if you have multiple tabs open, one is your bank and one is Amazon, let's say, or some kind of Yahoo website, and the Yahoo website has some sort of malware, this is what could happen to your information. And so they kind of started feeling more comfortable in approaching us. And then now we're at a point where people just call us and say, hey, I accidentally did something. I know I shouldn't have done that. You guys have provided a lot of training for us. I'm really sorry, I won't do it again. What do we have to do? And we appreciate that. So we don't penalize them and say, hey, we got you, or anything like that. So, okay, thank you for coming to us. And then here are some things you could look for the next time before you decide to click on a link. So just having that attitude of not penalizing them, but being more appreciative that they're.
Did you also have candy? Did you also have candy at your office?
No, but we did have food for them to come to us for the security little briefings. Yep.
Food, right? Incentive. and then real quick, the other piece of it is, as you said on the front end, the artistic side, right? The fact you are a dance teacher, and the fact is that it's the soft skill side. Is that the other piece of, would you say your job has really changed as well? Not just the fact that you can't be the CISO of no, but you have to kind of learn that it's all about talking to people and understanding how to be a team member versus just the overlord.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people just come to us sometimes like, oh, can I just download the software? But it's really getting down to the crux of it, like, why do you need it? What's the business purpose? Is there something else that we already have that can do it for you? And just trying to get to the reason why. Versus just saying, nope, that's not secure. Well, we looked at this website or this vulnerability database and it's already gotten hacked. Kind of just getting down to, well, why do you need it? Like, what is the purpose that you're trying to get? Do we already are we already meeting that purpose in other ways that we can kind of help you out with sometimes?
Excellent. All right, Lisa from the Postal Service.
Hi, Lisa Holman. I'm the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer from the Postal Service, or as I like to say, I'm the Vice Principal. I am very blessed to have a great CISO. Him and I have known each other for a number of years. Interesting fun fact, we're both actually still federal law enforcement officers. Greg, he worked in cybercrime and also financial audit for a number of years for the Postal Inspection Service. I worked crimes against children, child sexual exploitation using the mail for 14 years, managed the Victim Witness Program as well as the National Child Exploitation Program. I then came to headquarters was managing intelligence, IT, mobile, and a lot of other things, and for the law enforcement side of the Postal Service. And Greg was there, our CISO. We had a breach in 2014. Greg was called over to help with that. And what's interesting is I was working it from the other side, from the law enforcement perspective. So little did I ever know that I would be where I am today, back then, but I am. And I think it's interesting, there's a number of folks have talked up here today about their path and being focused on a certain path. I will challenge you that if you think you're on track to be in a certain place today, don't bet on it. You never know where you're going to end up, and you have to be open to new things, new challenging things. I started out as a forensic chemist. For 16 years I worked forensics and then went to the other side of investigations as an investigator, and then ended up as the deputy CISO of the Postal Service. The Postal Service is one of the largest IT environments in the world. We have a retail network that is larger than Starbucks, McDonald's, and Walmart combined. We have over 600,000 employees, 244,000 of them are on the network, 12 million emails a day that we have to deal with. We have millions of visits every day to USPS.com. We have to manage and secure an enormous network. And so as a result, Greg and I lead this as a mission, and I have spent over 30 years of my federal career protecting something. Pick it, but I've protected it. This is the ultimate in protecting, the organization. So I think that that's important, that instilling that mission of it's not just a job, it's not an IT job, it's not a security job, but you're literally protecting the organization from crime and from people who may want to do harm. And what we have been really good at, as the deputy CISO, I not only manage everything, but I then also have to lead directly under my teams, which is cybersecurity awareness and training, communications team. I have all the money. I have to manage all the money and the budgets, the people, workforce development, training, information security architecture, policy, compliance. So in those roles, it's a huge variety of things, and you talked about artistic. I actually wanted to major in journalism. I wanted to do communications when I was young, back in the young days.
I have an opening on my staff if you want to take a huge pay cut, and just kidding.
But I loved it, and one of those things was, do I go the path of science and become a chemist, or do I go into journalism? And I took the path of science. But today I've been very fortunate and again very blessed that I'm able to manage this enormous cybersecurity awareness team and this communications team, where one of the challenges we have, and you mentioned this about how to talk in real people language, I call it bunny language, to people, to get them to understand they are part of our mission. We're not here to stop them, we're here to enable the business. Interesting fact about the Postal Service, we're not just a government entity, we're also a business. We're in the business of making money and revenue. We have to move the mail. And ultimately, when it's not only about having the training, having the awareness, doing the campaigns, doing all the things that we do, buying the technologies, but it's also going to the people. And I've been very fortunate this year. One of the things that I was passionate about was we talked to people at headquarters, we talked to people at the network level, we talked to people who are on the computers. But one thing we weren't doing is talking to the people in the field, because we have a large SCADA network and an engineering environment that literally moves the mail, 660 million pieces per day. So as a result of that, how do we get those folks to buy into cybersecurity awareness? That's our largest part of our workforce, 400,000 folks overall. How do we get to them? And so the team started doing Gemba walks, or walking to the mail processing plants and taking tours and doing round-the-clock stand-up talks with the tours at midnight, at 6 a.m., saying, here's cybersecurity awareness. You move the mail, but if you plug your phone into a piece of engineering equipment, you could take it down. That means you could stop the mail. And when people go, oh my God, I could stop the mail, they're horrified. And I think that's where we've been very, very fortunate, and we continue this because we have 47,000 facilities. How do we reach them all? We're now engaging the team. We're engaging cyber guardians who are there carrying our message on. So it's a huge mission. It never ends. But I think if you don't not only engage the highest levels of leadership, which we've got incredible support from the Postmaster General, the executive leadership team, every one of them, we meet with them on a regular basis to brief them on the cybersecurity issues going on. Incredible support, but to the people literally who are making the business go, which is moving the mail. And if you can get them to understand what cybersecurity is about, then you're making a difference in your organization. So that's where I challenge you, no matter how big or small, get all the folks engaged in the mission.
I think the point you're making around getting the people engaged is really what the change in the CISO's role has been. It's no longer just, if you will, the back office side of it. But I want to start in the beginning of your conversation where you talked about a forensic chemist. Mm-hmm. How did that, if you will, initial education experience prepare you now for today and being a deputy CISO? What's the similarities? What would you draw on every day from, hey, when I was a chemist or a forensic chemist? It's very similar.
Yep. Great question. So as a forensic chemist, one of the things I had to do was figure things out, look at the puzzle, what was happening here with this case. I've typically been a forensic drug chemist. I also work poisons, a little bit of bombs in the mail, but typically forensics and as far as drugs. And one of the things was, how are they hiding or how are they trying to hide the drugs? And it was always a puzzle to figure out. One of the things is, with my background in education, is focus to detail. But also, I had to translate those forensic lab results in a court of law, literally thousands of times, to a jury, often to a jury of folks who have absolutely no science or technical background. And so as a result, translating the science into real people language was something I had to learn early on, or else the case wouldn't go forward. In a grand jury, they wouldn't indict. And so I learned that skill as a forensic chemist. I also had to train other agents when I was with the Drug Enforcement Administration or postal inspectors when I was in the crime lab for the Postal Service about drugs of abuse, how to field test street drugs, how to make drugs, how to do all of those things. And so again, educating them about the dangers of those drugs was also very important, because as they're handling them, I think it was critical to get the message across. It's not about just doing the job, but all the consequences of doing the job. And I think as I did that for a number of years in training in law enforcement and working with folks, it was really, really powerful to see how people just got it. And then making that to the other side of the investigations, going to the other side, which is working crimes against children. I didn't know I would do that. I thought I was going to work, help with the drug as in the mail. And I was very blessed and fortunate. Someone asked, not a lot of women in the field working crimes against children. And I didn't even hesitate. And then again, trying to explain that, trying to explain what's going on the computer. In the forensic, I had to work undercover in the digital world. So you talk about being part of cybercrime early on. I was part of cybercrime for many, many years, working undercover to find those who would sexually abuse and exploit children. So that translated into a whole nother set of skills, which is why I'm very passionate about what I do today. I've seen all the good and the bad of cyber, and I've seen the power of it. So I think that's what prepared me for where I am today and what convicts me to do what we do.
Still a lot of uncovering to do in cyber, I'm sure. Joe from USDA.
Thank you, Jason. Our paths are different. What we heard from Jyoti and Lisa, mine was a little different. I was a part of the Department of Defense. I was one of the first cyber attack planners, late 90s, and learning how to attack a network, how to think like an adversary, and then try to learn to take that from a defensive perspective. And being military, we try to keep it simple. I'll give you 5 lessons learned that I learned the hard way that I hope you can use. One is influence and manipulate your seniors. Okay, and how do you do that? Well, there are some bad things and good things. First of all, the cybersecurity scorecard, a dread for every CISO here if it has one, but also a tool. Hey, look, we're red. I need money. Get me money. IG audits. Hey, you don't want to be an IG audit. You don't want to be in a paper for failing for porn usage or something like that. Compliance with FISMA. Make sure your evaluations at the SCS level are being graded on your compliance. Also, the ability to take organizational goals and objectives and infuse cybersecurity. We talked about the CISO. I look at it a little differently. We have a thing called CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We often focus on the confidentiality. I turn it around and I focus on the availability. You don't want to be hacked, so I have to take the networks down. So let's be secure so we can keep the availability of the systems. So it's kind of a different way of looking at it. But also creating your cybersecurity strategy that infuses into their strategy. Those are really key things. That's your point one. Point two, in a very different way of thinking, you are compromised. Think of your network being compromised. It's a totally new way of looking at things. We as CISOs are very proud, and we don't think we're going to be hacked. But if you thought you're hacked, it's a different way of managing those networks. Hunt missions, trying to find the bad guys in your networks, insider threat, those things that Calvin mentioned earlier. Those are kind of things that you want to look at. Third, even though you may be compromised, make it as hard and costly for the adversary as possible. Do your patching, do good work with your IPS, do everything you can, because make it, Lisa's a smart person, hopefully her network's less secure than mine, and they'll go to her network. So you want to be tough. Fourth, and probably the hardest one, people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Good, your staff. Motivate them, mentor them, give them the tools and challenges, and never micromanage them. The biggest thrill as a CISO I have is giving a new IPS to a junior person and watch their mind explode and the great things that can come much better than I can do. The bad, porn, child porn unfortunately, misuse of IT, hit them hard, hit them often, and enforce your policy. That's the bad. The ugly, uneducated users. They're going to click the phishing email no matter what you do. It's ugly. Do your best to minimize the ugly. And probably one you haven't heard here, and it's kind of military focus, is be a leader. You are the cybersecurity program of that agency or organization. You're the energy, you're the cheerleader, you're the champion, and when everything fails, it's on you. So your personality, your energy can change an organization. That's why I'm a CISO. We often heard a couple presentations ago, what I do matters because I can see it in my people, I can see it in the staff, and the way we do cybersecurity. Jason?
All right. So we're going to come to your questions in just a second, so think of them. Audience participation, remember? All right. But Joe, I very much enjoyed all 5 of your areas, and you talk about people as the hardest, and we hear that often. And maybe it's a question I'll just lead off for the entire panel, but Joe, maybe start. The people part is the weakest link. I was just in another panel, and a gentleman from NSA talked about 96% of all attacks are coming through email. NSA hasn't seen a zero-day vulnerability problem, or they've had to react to one in 27 months. Majority is still people. The people is the weakest link. So talk maybe a little bit about how you're dealing with that people side, because USDA is 100,000 people.
Yes.
And it doesn't take someone, you're at APHIS, it doesn't take someone at APHIS, right? It just takes someone in USDA to compromise APHIS.
So it's a couple things. First of all, having the power, there's punishment power. So CISO, am I empowered to make decisions? So training, for example, am I able to take people off the network? In my agency, I am. If I see malware, I cut them off Active Directory, we isolate them, cut the cancer off the body. They don't do the training, we cut them off. So they don't get paid, you have to do a time card. So that's part of it, that punishment thing. But also that defense we talked about, Jason. What tools do we have? And cybersecurity is often not a yes or no. It's what can I use? A little bit of IPS here, a little bit of training here, a little bit maybe of network segmentation here, and you kind of put them together and try to get that risk reduced as much as you can.
So here's the tough question, though. I'm Sonny Perdue. I'm your secretary.
He's tough.
And he clicks on a link because my grandchild sent me something that I thought was, and now it's a bad example, but how do you deal with that kind of, the higher you go in the organization, the harder it is to cut you off.
Well,
and then let's want Lisa and Jyoti to jump in. So go, you start.
Yeah,
you start, and then
so
we'll
Gary
go.
Washington was my former CIO at APHIS, so we've talked, and we've instilled some of that in him. So I go to good Gary. Gary, I call him the governor. Governor, make sure you talk to Sonny, and we're going to cut you off. So there's that education. And like foreign travel, for example, how do you tell SCSs when they take their laptops out, I want those things wiped when they come back? Mm-hmm. It's that massaging, that getting your street cred in the organization. It just takes time.
Right.
Thank you.
Lisa and Jyoti, jump in on that same question. People, but also the punishment.
Yeah. So we, in my organization, my team tests 15,000 people per month in phishing. And what we do is, when I got there, one of the things I ask is, okay, so what? So if they click, well, we tell them they shouldn't do it. Well, what if they keep clicking? Well, we keep telling them they don't do it. So when I got there, we did exactly that. If you click, you have the training you're sent to. If you continue, it's called, I call them serial clickers, repeat clickers. We're thinking of a great word for it, and there isn't one. But there are ramifications. You get management counseling. We've gone to legal and HR. There's an escalation of discipline with regards to this type of behavior. And it applies to everyone. The other thing is we engaged our highest levels of leadership, and every quarter I report out on the phishing results. They take that very seriously. They want to know where they are in the organization and how their folks are doing, especially those folks that have elevated privileges or those that have access to sensitive systems. And so they want to know. Unfortunately, it starts to get really like, what are the names of the people? But one of the things too about the training is if you haven't taken the training again, it was, well, we keep asking, we keep asking. No, we shut them down, the same thing. You don't have access. And when I got there, it was interesting because when we started shutting people down, oh my God, and we had vice presidents, we had folks with, who were the end all be all and said, no, you can't shut me down. Well, we did. And I will say to them when they're yelling and screaming at my manager of awareness and training is, if our postmaster general can take her training, so can you. And they quickly go to take their training. So I will say that we also track the results and report those up to the highest levels of leadership. And if folks haven't done what they're supposed to, they also will reach out to them personally. So I'm very fortunate, again, our leadership is embraced the fact that we can't just keep saying pretty please. Also combining, a strategy of not just, people. It's not if someone clicks, it's when. I mean, it happens. The other thing is getting behind why they click. We look at risk populations as who are the ones that click the most and why do they do that? What do they do in their job that causes them to click when others don't? And it's been an interesting journey on that. It changes somewhat, but we continually see certain populations that click. And as a result, we are starting to do focused training for them, role-based training, and focusing on the change behind it and the psychology of why they're doing what they're doing. So that's been very fortunate. Again, managing up, there's times where I tell my CISO, no, we don't have the money. No, we don't have the resources. Or pick, here's the things we're doing. What do you want us to do? And we've known each other for so many years. I have a very open and honest relationship with him and very respectful to say, here's what we've got, what are we gonna do? And it works very, very well. He's very good about also messaging up as well. But the good thing is myself and others are in our Executive Cyber Risk Committee, which is a quarterly meeting with a certain team from the executive leadership team that reports directly to the Postmaster General. They all understand the importance, and if something's going on in their organization, they want to know about it, and I'm very fortunate. I'm not afraid, nor is my CISO afraid to tell them.
All right. Jyoti, jump in, and then who has a question? So after that, we'll get to your questions.
Yeah, so we do
About the same.
similar things as well. We have the annual security awareness training. We also have role-based training and other kinds of training. What we actually found was, especially with clinical staff, that yes, they do take the training and we do disable their accounts by a certain date if they don't take the training. But even for those that do take the training, they're not really taking the training because they're trying to learn. They just want to take the training to keep hitting next until they're done. Try to answer the quiz questions correctly, or just keep retaking the training until they get the quiz questions correctly, and then say, okay, we took the training, we're good to go. And what we made the mistake of doing in previous years was not following up with them maybe on a monthly basis or on a semi-annual basis to really put an awareness and security out there. So what we just started doing this year was actually having monthly. What we did try to do also send emails out saying, hey, here's the common security things that are happening, trends, let's say holiday season. People might be reaching out to you, phishing attempts for clicking on links for holiday scams. But we also found that those weren't really being read either. So that's when we started the monthly, almost mandatory trainings. These are just like 10, 15-minute trainings that anyone can make time for. And we would physically go to them face to face. And we actually tailored our training for clinical staff. Because what we found was IT security training, the clinical staff would look at it and be like, oh, I don't know what this is talking about. I would never do that. Or, this is kind of German to me. I don't really understand this role-based stuff anyway. So we tailored our training specifically for clinical staff. What we also did was we went to the sysadmins, the operational, technical operations staff, and tailored our training to them. So we had sysadmins really focusing on how to build a server securely. We went to DBAs, how to build databases securely. Desktop admins, how to build the images securely. And we made that part of their performance reviews on a yearly basis. Because otherwise, the role was on the security office only.
Joe, jump in.
Yeah, just real quick. So Lisa and Jyoti are talking about moral courage. Right? I'm talking about being a leader in the face of your cybersecurity program. We all have to make decisions. Seniors don't want things reported out of your agencies. And I have, I'm sure my colleagues have as well, has reported anyway. Your job and duty is to get that thing reported and cleaned up. Moral courage. Thank you, Jason.
All right, who has a question? Come on, guys. There we go. Someone's got to break the seal, as I call it.
Yep.
Tell me who you are.
Yes, hello, my name is Shawnee Smith, and I just have to say I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. I'm a chemist, and I'm transitioning over to cybersecurity now. So this question is for Mrs. Jyoti. As far as medical devices, do you have a specific training for the clinicians? Cybersecurity training?
Medical devices. Yes, that's a broad question. And that is one of our, that is the reason I don't sleep at night. The challenge with medical devices, it's not just the clinical staff that we need to focus on, it's also the medical device vendors. And there's the concern with that is there's sometimes CT scanners, MRI scanners, all kinds of these very complicated medical devices. There's only one vendor that makes them sometimes. And we've tried that approach of going to them and say, hey, here's all the security vulnerabilities on your MRI scanner. We're going to shut it down if you don't patch these or if you don't come up with a fix. And they're like, okay, go ahead, shut it down. Who else are you going to use? So what we started doing is we started incorporating security into their built-in contracts. So all IT contracts come through our security office now, even things as simple as a jump drive. It's considered IT, it's coming through our office. So we factored in FISMA policies, anything, if it's cloud-based, we would put in FedRAMP policies into their contracts itself. What we also found was they would sign off on the contract not really knowing what's being asked of them, which is great for us because when we try to make it operational, then we can kind of go back to them like, hey, so did you meet these policies? And then like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, hey, here's your contract, here's the FISMA policies. Did you actually click on the link and read what a FISMA policy is? But then now they can't take it back because they're held liable for that.
Okay.
We're also working with the FDA on that too, because some of their policies aren't exactly verbatim understandable, and there's some leeway in there. So we're trying to work with them on making their policies a little bit more clearer for the vendor so they can't really argue back.
All right, another question.
From your perspective, what is the best location or in the organizational chart for a CISO? Is it under CFO? Is it under CIO? Is it directly under the CEO?
I would say the CEO. There's a conflict of interest between the CIO and the CISO. He wants to have availability, sometimes we have to shut things down. So that conflict of interest, usually security gets trumped.
I would not disagree. We currently do report to the CIO, who directly reports to the Postmaster General. We typically don't have any issues, but to your point, there can be a conflict of interest there.
I would agree as well. I would also say it really depends on the relationship you have with whoever you report to, and are you able to build that relationship with them? Whether it's the CIO, CRO, sometimes CFO, really it comes down to speaking their language, making them know that security is important, and then putting it in such a way that they understand it's important. I think you can make that relationship work with anyone that you report to at the end of the day.
And to your point, our CIO we brief her monthly, not only her and the other VPs in the CIO organization on security issues, but then we also brief her separately on SANS, each control, where we are, and things like that. So she's very, very engaged in the security process. But if you don't have someone who isn't, that could be definitely an issue.
I think in my 20 years of covering this environment, I don't think there's ever been a federal CISO who doesn't answer to the CIO. Outside of maybe, DoD may have one, but I think at least in the civilian world. But question over here.
Yeah, I'm Bruce DeGranci. I'm from University of Maryland, University College. I know that most, if not all, federal agencies have a number of third-party contractors that have access to the network. Do you or should you require that they have a cybersecurity policies within their organization that you will audit?
Yes, we do. We actually asked them to take our security trainings and follow everything that an NIH employee would. If they come back with, well, we're not allowed to do that, or we take our own training, we ask for a copy of their training, or an example of the kind of trainings that they take, any background investigations that they have to go through, and we compare that with ours. And if it's not sufficient, we tell them it's not satisfactory if they have to take ours.
We do the same thing. When I got to CISO contractors, it was optional, and I said there is no option. And so every contract in the Postal Service, your contractor does take the cybersecurity training. They're also subject to the phishing test as well. Also, if a contractor fails the phishing test, we go to the account manager, report them, and then there is a discussion with that account manager. To your point about ensuring security is in the contracts, because we are so large, we have such a dependency on suppliers and external dependency, we are requiring that as well as part of the contracts. We have not had an issue so far with any contractors taking the training or not wanting to, or their company not allowing them to. So we're fortunate in that aspect.
Joe, I'm going to jump in and get one last question in because she's about to give me the hook. I got 2 seconds. Quickly, Mike.
Good afternoon. What is your viewpoint on TIC and the next gen of where TIC is going?
Trusted internet connection for those of you who are following at home.
I'll let you start.
I'll let you go.
Well, yes, we do. One thing, the United States Postal Service does not have to adhere to executive orders and FSMA and other rules.
But you do anyways, because
Yes.
you're good team players.
We align, we do not have to comply. So yes, we do adhere to that.
Joe, since I cut you off last
I was
time,
going to say yes.
I'm just trying to think is that the VPN connection, mandatory VPN
it's
connection?
the
The
internet
trusted internet
gateways,
connection,
so
the
the
gateways,
MTIPs, so you
yeah,
have in front of
MTIPs,
your
yep.
network traffic.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. We're following that, but I'm an agency under USDA, so the CDM and all that stuff. So a little slower to get back to us, but we're tracking.
And Joe, you get the last
Yeah, we
word?
do as well.
Same thing, okay. All right, well, the hook has been given. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So let's thank our panelists. They did a wonderful job. They put up with me. Thank you all.
University of Maryland University College is now University of Maryland Global Campus.